You did everything right, and still, you keep getting hurt. You've tried your best, not just once, but your entire life. You've always been the one who listens, who keeps the peace, who softens your words so they won't cut too deep. You've been the one who backs down when things get tense, the one who forgives first, the one who patches up broken relationships, even when it wasn't your fault. And still, you keep getting hurt. You still find yourself pulled into relationships that leave you drained. You still become the emotional dumping ground, the target of manipulation, the pawn in psychological games you never asked to play. You're still the one they come to when they need someone to blame, control, or silence. Have you ever paused, too tired to even cry, and asked yourself, why is it always me? Why do others seem to walk through life unscathed, drifting through friendships and workplaces and love without so much chaos? While you, even with your carefulness, your sincerity, your kindness, end up the one carrying the damage. You begin to question yourself. You think, maybe I'm too soft. Maybe I need to toughen up. Maybe I need stronger boundaries, clearer rules, a colder heart. You read books, you learn affirmations, you draw your lines in the sand, and still, the cycle returns. A new face, a different tactic, another quiet war. Except now you're more tired, more guarded, and lonelier. You feel like you're giving off something, some invisible frequency that makes you a perfect target. You can't name it, but you can feel it, undeniably. And slowly, you begin to fear your own kindness. You start to wonder if your tenderness is the very thing that's hurting you. You fear that what makes you gentle is what also makes you vulnerable. But you know, deep down, you don't want to become hardened. You don't want to be numb. You just want to be yourself and still be safe. And maybe it's time you hear this. It's not that you're wrong. It's not that you're weak. It's that you haven't yet fully understood what's happening inside of you. You've been living on the surface, while the truth of your life lies beneath. In the depths of what Carl Jung called the unconscious. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Maybe the reason you keep becoming a target isn't because you're powerless, but because some doors within you are still left open. Maybe you've been sending out signals from old wounds without even knowing it, and others are unconsciously responding. So this isn't a story about blame. This is a story about awareness, and the path you're about to walk isn't about fighting harder. It's about finally turning inward, to meet what's been waiting in the dark, not to make you cold, but to make you solid, like a stone in the ocean, unmoved by the waves, to become someone that those who prey on weakness can no longer see, because there is nothing left for them to hold on to. Toxic people don't see you. They see the wounds you haven't healed. There's a quiet truth that carries more weight than most people are ready to face. Toxic people don't choose their victims randomly. They don't just happen to find you. It's not because you're weak, not because you're too kind or too soft-spoken. It's because you're still leaving an invisible door open, a door that leads straight into the part of you that hasn't yet healed. Carl Jung called this the unintegrated unconscious, that hidden part of the psyche where everything you've rejected, suppressed, or refused to face still lives, breathing beneath the surface. You might be dressed with confidence, you might speak with clarity, set firm boundaries, and present yourself as grounded, but if somewhere inside you, a quiet voice is still whispering, "Please don't abandon me. Please see me, approve of me, understand me," then that voice, though silent, still sends out a frequency into the world. And toxic people, they hear it. They smell your fear like wolves scenting blood. They sense your unspoken insecurities, the cracks you've tried to patch over with perfection. They're not magical, just deeply instinctual. They feed on emotion and they gravitate toward open wounds. But this isn't your fault. You didn't ask to be wounded. Still, you are responsible for what your wounds now emit into the world. So the answer isn't to fight harder. It's not to build higher walls or shout louder. The real freedom comes when you stop playing the game altogether. And the only way to stop playing is to no longer have anything within you that can be played. Toxic people don't fear the loud or the confrontational. They don't avoid the clever or the defensive. They avoid those who have no emotional openings left to exploit. People who have healed no longer need to prove themselves. They no longer seek approval. They carry a quiet integrity that repels chaos, not through force, but through absence. They become psychologically invisible, not because they're hiding, but because there's nothing for predators to latch onto. No buttons, no unresolved guilt, no desperation to be chosen, loved, or validated. And to reach this state, you must stop scanning the outside world for danger and start turning inward, not to blame yourself, but to understand. It is the unhealed parts of you that send out invitations. That's where the cycle begins, and where it can finally end. Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The person who infuriates you, the one who seems to hold power over you, the one who mirrors back every pain you've tried to bury, might just be showing you the exact place within yourself that is still waiting to be seen. This is not surrender. This is a redirection of power, from fighting the world to finally facing yourself. You don't need thicker armor. You need less war inside you. Because when there is nothing left to hide, there is nothing left to target, and you stop being fertile ground for manipulation, because you've become a place where no psychological war can take root. You don't just survive the battlefield. You dissolve the battlefield entirely, by no longer needing to participate in it. The unintegrated shadow, and the cost of abandoning yourself. You may not remember when it began. The moment you started cutting off pieces of yourself, hiding the parts that were too much, too angry, too emotional, too opinionated. You just knew that some feelings were dangerous, some truths made people leave, some parts of you had to be buried in order to belong. So you adapted. You wore the smile even when your jaw trembled. You kept the peace while a storm roared inside your ribs. You learned which masks were acceptable, and you wore them well. But what happens to the parts of you that you disown? What happens to the feelings you were never allowed to feel? The desires you were shamed for having? The rage you never got to express? They don't die. They retreat into what Jung called the shadow. Not a demon, not a flaw, not evil. The shadow is simply the part of you that you could not bring to light. The part you feared would make you unlovable. The part you thought you had to abandon in order to survive. But make no mistake, the shadow does not stay silent. It doesn't vanish because you ignore it. It waits, and while it waits, it whispers through your triggers. It bleeds into your relationships. It pulls strings from the unconscious, until one day you wake up in a life that feels like it's happening to you, not from you. That is the cost of self-abandonment. You lose your sovereignty. You hand over the reins of your psyche to the very parts you refuse to face, and the world responds accordingly. The more you suppress your shadow, the more others reflect it back to you. You'll see it in the people who enrage you, who control you, who shame you. You'll meet it in relationships where you're silenced, diminished, or manipulated, not because you deserve it, but because your unclaimed energy is seeking expression. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is where most turn away. Because to look at your shadow is to sit with shame. To admit, yes, there's a part of me that envies, a part that wants to dominate, a part that feels superior or inferior, a part that wants to be seen, praised, obeyed, adored, even when I pretend I'm above all that. But here's the sacred paradox. The moment you name your darkness, it begins to lose control over you. Not because it disappears, but because it no longer needs to scream to be heard. You become whole again. And when you are whole, you no longer seek in others what you refuse to give yourself. You stop tolerating the intolerable. You stop being magnetized to those who mirror back your disowned pain. You no longer have to keep repeating the same emotional storylines, because you've rewritten the script from within. That is what Jung meant when he said, the shadow, when integrated, becomes a source of strength. It's not about fixing yourself, it's about reclaiming yourself, even the parts you were taught to fear. Because when you stop abandoning your inner truth, the world can no longer use it against you. No one can shame you with a part of you that you've already embraced. No one can manipulate a wound that you've already healed. No one can control a need that you've already nourished within yourself. This is the cost of denying your shadow. You don't just lose your authenticity, you lose your freedom. But this is also the reward of embracing it. You begin to walk through the world whole, no longer fragmented, no longer leaking energy, no longer asking others to complete what you've reclaimed. Projection, the mirror that reveals what you cannot yet face. Have you ever noticed how some people ignite a fire inside you the moment they walk into a room, not because they hurt you directly, but because something about them feels unbearable? Their arrogance, their neediness, their silence, their loudness. You can't explain it. They just trigger you. That reaction isn't random. It's not about them. It's your shadow, calling from the depths, reflected through the mirror of another. Carl Jung called this projection, when we unconsciously place the contents of our own shadow onto others. We say, he's so controlling, but never notice how we manipulate in more subtle ways. We call her attention-seeking, but ignore the deep hunger in ourselves to be seen, finally and fully. We are not lying when we label others. We are leaking disowned parts of ourselves into the world, hoping someone else will carry the weight of what we still refuse to claim. Projection is not an attack. It is a signal, a blinking red light saying, there's something here, something unexamined, something in you. And this is where liberation begins, when instead of asking, why are they like this, you ask, what part of me is being reflected back? Because the person who irritates you most may be embodying a truth you've been taught to bury. Their selfishness may mirror your denied desire to finally put yourself first. Their power may echo your long-silenced will. Their shamelessness may confront the shame you've spent years covering up with kindness. It doesn't mean that their behavior is justified. It means their presence is revealing. They become a mirror, harsh, unfiltered, and often unwanted, but one that shows you what you could not otherwise see. Jung warned us, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. He did not say it would be easy, but he did say it would be worth it, because every projection reclaimed is a piece of yourself returned. Every time you withdraw your judgment from another and turn it inward with honesty, you deepen your self-awareness. And with that awareness comes power. The power to no longer be thrown off course by every person who acts out the drama you've tried to suppress. The power to respond instead of react. The power to choose what story you're telling, not just about them, but about you. Projection blinds you to your own patterns, but self-reflection begins to restore your sight. So the next time someone stirs something deep in you, before you point the finger, pause, feel it, breathe into it. Ask yourself, what if this emotion isn't just about them? What if it's an invitation to retrieve a piece of me? Because this is how the unconscious becomes conscious. Not all at once, but in small, powerful moments of reclaiming what you once had to abandon. And when you do, you no longer walk through life flinching at your own reflection. You become someone who no longer fears mirrors, because you've met the one that matters most, the one inside you. Psychic integrity, the silent energy that repels toxic people. You don't have to fight to be free. You don't have to cut people off with rage, build walls around your heart, or shout your worth into the void. There is another kind of power, a quieter one that doesn't seek attention or demand recognition. It simply is. Carl Jung called it psychic integrity, the wholeness of a soul no longer at war with itself. And when you carry this integrity, you don't repel toxic people by force. You repel them by frequency. Because toxic people don't feed on strength. They feed on chaos, on confusion, on wounds that are still bleeding. They sniff out the fractures in your self-concept, the places where you still question your worth, where you still need to be liked, forgiven, chosen. They don't attack your wholeness. They enter through the cracks. But when you begin the work of integrating your shadow, when you've looked at your rage, your envy, your grief, and said to them, "You belong too," something profound shifts. The cracks begin to close, not because you've become perfect, but because you're no longer ashamed of your humanity. And shame, unspoken, unprocessed, is one of the strongest attractors of toxic dynamics. It makes you perform instead of speak your truth. It makes you tolerate what you should walk away from. It keeps you apologizing for simply existing. But a person with psychic integrity does not apologize for existing. They do not explain their boundaries, justify their silence, or beg for basic respect. They do not seek to be feared or admired. They simply stand, whole, seen, and sovereign. And toxic people, they can't play their game with someone who won't react. They can't provoke someone who no longer hides parts of themselves. They can't manipulate someone who isn't afraid to lose them. Because here's the truth. Psychic integrity radiates. It's an energy that speaks louder than your words. It says, "I know who I am. I know what I carry. I know what I will and will not allow." You don't have to prove it. You don't have to threaten or posture. Your presence becomes your protection. And here's what's extraordinary. You don't just repel what drains you. You begin to attract what restores you. Healthy people recognize the energy of someone who's done their work, someone who isn't projecting, performing, or pretending. They feel safe around you, not because you're agreeable, but because you're real. You've stopped contorting yourself into roles, the peacemaker, the good one, the giver, the forgiver. You're not trying to be perfect. You're trying to be true. And truth is magnetic to those who seek it, but repellent to those who live in distortion. So, if you've ever wondered, why do toxic people keep entering my life? Try asking instead, what within me is still unclaimed, unguarded, unresolved? And when you begin to answer that, honestly, slowly, with love, you'll find something deeper than protection. You'll find peace. Not the kind that comes from isolation, but the kind that comes from no longer betraying yourself. You'll no longer walk into rooms scanning for threats. You'll no longer spend your energy anticipating betrayal. You'll move with a calm certainty that says, "I trust myself to see clearly now." That is psychic integrity, not a mask, not a shield, but a living expression of wholeness, the kind of presence that toxic people instinctively avoid. Because when there's nothing left in you to exploit, they move on. And you move forward, unshaken, untouched, and unmistakably free. The art of not feeding the drama, and why stillness is power. They will try to provoke you, not always with shouting, sometimes with silence, with a sharp glance, with a delayed message, with a subtle accusation wrapped in concern, or a passive-aggressive sigh that says, "You've disappointed me again." And everything in you, everything you've been conditioned to be, will want to respond. You'll want to explain, to defend, to prove your innocence, to repair the discomfort in the air. But what if you didn't? What if you didn't give them the emotional fuel they're counting on? What if your greatest strength was not your ability to argue, but your refusal to enter the arena at all? Because here's the truth no one wants to say out loud: drama dies without your participation, and most toxic dynamics aren't sustained by aggression, they're sustained by reaction. Every time you raise your voice, plead your case, over-explain, you are not winning. You are feeding the very game designed to keep you confused, exhausted, and off-center. Carl Jung taught that what you resist persists. The more energy you pour into battling someone's manipulations, the more entangled you become in the very web you're trying to escape. It's not that your feelings aren't valid. It's that your energy is sacred, and not everyone deserves access to it. especially not those who bait you into emotional chaos, then call you crazy for reacting. Toxic people are often masters of emotional inversion. They trigger you, and then make your reaction the problem. They provoke, and then paint themselves the victim of your anger, and before you know it, you're apologizing for the very wound they caused. That is not connection. That is control. And the antidote isn't to outsmart them, it's to become unavailable. Unavailable for guilt-tripping, unavailable for circular arguments, unavailable for the constant performance of justification. This is where silence becomes sacred, not the silence of fear or submission, but the silence of presence, of someone who no longer needs to explain their worth to anyone. Because true boundaries are not loud, they're energetic. They say, "I'm not here to convince you. I don't owe you my peace of mind to satisfy your chaos. I am allowed to walk away without turning it into a lesson for you." This is not cruelty, it's clarity. And clarity, to those who thrive on confusion, feels like cruelty. But to you, to your nervous system, your soul, your inner child, clarity feels like coming home. You are not here to soothe the discomfort of those who harm you. You are not here to play therapist to someone who manipulates you. You are not here to perform softness in hopes of being spared. You are here to be whole, to choose peace over approval, to know when a conversation is no longer a conversation, but a trap. Jung said, "A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them." This is your inferno. The fire of learning to sit in discomfort without reacting. The fire of letting someone misunderstand you and not rushing to fix it. The fire of walking away while your body trembles to stay. But through that fire, you emerge with something rare, stillness, not passivity, not apathy. Stillness as in, nothing in me is for sale anymore. You are no longer bargaining your peace for validation. You are no longer explaining yourself to people committed to mishearing you. You are no longer filling the silence with words that only echo back in distortion. This is how manipulation loses its grip. This is how toxic people lose interest, not through confrontation, but through disengagement. Because when you no longer react, you are no longer available for the game. And when you are no longer available for the game, you finally begin to live. You no longer flinch at your reflection. You no longer search the faces of others for a verdict on your worth. You no longer shrink when someone disapproves, and you no longer inflate when someone applauds. You've returned to yourself, not a version polished for their comfort, but the one who breathes without performing, lives without seeking permission, and stands not above others, but within yourself. This isn't about becoming untouchable. It's about being undivided. There is no longer a war inside. No need to silence one part of you so another can belong. No frantic need to be understood. No ache to be saved. Just stillness. Just the sound of your own soul. Clear, steady, unmasked. The world hasn't changed. Toxic people still circle. Triggers still flicker. But you are no longer catchable, because you no longer seek what they promise. You no longer bleed where you used to ache, and you no longer mistake survival for love. This is not triumph. It's not revenge. It's something quieter, more sacred. It is freedom, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that simply walks away, without explaining, without bitterness, without needing to be seen. Because you already see yourself. In today's world, psychic noise is everywhere. Social media amplifies projection. Workplaces reward persona over presence. Family dynamics repeat unconscious patterns. And the pressure to be liked is stronger than ever. But here's what Carl Jung would tell you now. You don't have to play the game. Every time you choose internal stillness over reactivity, every time you pause instead of explain, every time you sit with discomfort instead of outsourcing it, you take back your power from the collective unconscious. Integration doesn't happen in a retreat. It happens in the moment you read a passive-aggressive text and choose not to spiral. In the moment you hear criticism and ask, "What does this reflect in me?" In the moment you feel the urge to people-please and instead, breathe. The more you turn inward, the less you need to control the world. And the less control you seek, the freer you become. Not perfect, but whole. And in a fragmented world, wholeness is rebellion. If this message touched something deep within you, if you felt seen, understood, or simply less alone, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps this space remain a sanctuary for those walking the path of self-discovery and healing. Like, share, or comment below, not for the algorithm, but to remind someone else. They're not broken, they're becoming whole. Thank you for being here. Truly.